All right, this is the card we're going to make today. And I'm going to use an Altenew stamp set that's called Build a Flower-Dahlia. This is a multi-level stamp set. So I'm going to use my stamping platform, and I'm going to start by stamping the outline stamp of this particular flower using Memento Tuxedo Black. And I'm going to actually ink it up multiple times. Clean my stamp, and now I'm going to go to the next stamp in this particular stamp set, and I'm going to layer it on. Sorry, my head is in the way, but I'm going to use the instruction sheet that came with the stamps when I layer this level onto the initial level. And then once I've got it positioned the way I want it, I'm going to go ahead and ink it up. I'm going to use some Altenew matching ink cubes, and I'm going to start with some soft lilac as the bottom layer of the stamp. And then we'll go ahead and ink it up. I'm going to do it multiple times in order to get it a little darker. Clean the stamp, and now I'm going to go to the next layer. Again, I'm going to use the instructions that came with the stamps in positioning this particular stamp onto what's already been stamped. And once again, my head kind of gets in the way because I want to try and look from top down to try and get this as perfectly aligned as possible. And then once I have it aligned up, I'll be ready to stamp the next color, which is going to be slightly darker than the base color. This is soft lilac. And we'll go ahead and stamp this layer onto the flower. And we start to get the three-dimensional effect. And the final layer of the flower, and position that on, and it's actually the instructions, you're lining it onto the outline stamp that we initially stamped. Again, my head is in the way, I apologize. But now we're getting ready to stamp this final layer of the stamp, and I'm using Midnight Violet for this layer. And now the flower is complete. I'm going to go ahead and put on the matching die and cut out this flower, holding the die down with some washi tape. And we've got our first flower. Now I'm going to do the next flower that's in this set. Once again, I'm going to start with the outline stamp, place it in my stamping platform, and I'm going to use Memento Tuxedo Black again for the outline. Going to stamp it multiple times to get a darker image. Clean off my stamp and go on to the next layer. And once again, I'm going to use the instructions that come with the stamp on layering this layer onto the previous layer of the stamp. And once again, my head is in the way, but there's really no getting around that much. I'm trying to get this positioned as well as I can. And once I'm satisfied, I'm ready to ink up the next one. And I didn't realize I wasn't filming. I stamped that particular one with Sunray. And now we're going to go on to the next layer and go through the same process here. I'm going to just match this up with the previous layer according to the instruction sheet. And I'm kind of showing here the parts of the stamp that I matched up. And I'm going to use chamomile for this layer. And so I'm going to ink it up. And now we're ready for the final layer. And so I'm going to position this, matching up the areas according to the instructions. And once I'm satisfied, I'm ready to use some Snapdragon for this final layer of this particular flower. And I did it a couple of times to get it a little darker of a color. I'm going to use the matching die and cut it out again, and now we've got both flowers. Now I'm going to use all of the leaves, so I'm going to start out with the outline layer of each of those leaves. I'm going to use Memento Tuxedo Black, ink it up multiple times in order to get a darker image. Now I'm ready to position the second layer of each of those leaves. Again, sorry for my head. So just getting all those on as once I'm satisfied. I'm going to use the Altenew Sweet Leaf as the next layer, or actually as the first color layer of these particular leaves, and I'm going to ink it up a couple of times. Now I'm ready to position the next layer of the leaves. And once again, the instructions for this come with the stamps, and so you just follow the areas it says to match up, you match those up. And once I'm satisfied with the position of all these stamps, I'm going to use just green to ink up this layer of the leaves. And I'm going to use the matching dies to cut these out. And these are the leaves. And as a possible, but now I'm going to use some Paper Studio white cardstock. This is the heavyweight cardstock. And I'm scoring it at 5.5 to make an A2 size card. Now I'm using some heavyweight cream cardstock cut at 5.25 by 4 inches. And I'm going to use a Paper Studio embossing folder. I'm going to spritz it with just a little bit of water before I emboss it, and that helps loosen the fibers in the paper and gives you a more uniform emboss. Now I'm going to use some of my glue, and I'm going to glue this embossed layer onto the cover of my card base. And now I'll just do a rough placement of the flowers. And I'll glue on that first flower. And I'll use some foam squares to pop up the second flower a little bit. And I'm going to realize I got that second flower on upside down, so later I'm going to carefully remove that second flower and put it back on right side up. And now I'm putting the leaves on, just gluing them to the base. And now I'm going to stamp the sentiment, one of the sentiments that come with the stamp set. And I'm using black heavyweight cardstock, again, Paper Studio. I'm using my anti-static tool because I'm going to emboss. And so I'm going to use some Versamark ink, and I'm going to ink up this sentiment. And I'm going to use some ultrafine white embossing powder. Now I wasn't too satisfied with how this particular one turned out, so I actually just turned this over and did it again, and I inked it up multiple times with the embossing powder in order to get the darker image. Then I'm trimming it down with my paper trimmer. And I'm going to use some foam squares to attach it to the card base. And I'm just using my tube ruler to make sure that it's on there straight. And I also wanted to add a little bit of sparkle to it, so I'm going to add some sequins. And I will just use my liquid glue to attach the sequins to the card base. And so here I'm gluing those sequins down. And I'm going to add some clear Wink of Stella to the flowers to add some shimmer to the flowers. And now I'm going to use some 1/8" glue dots. I want to add some gems to the center of the larger sequins. I tried using just some liquid glue, but that didn't seem to hold it down very well. So I'm using the glue dots now to get those gems connected to the interiors of those sequins. And here I'm saying that's when I turned around that yellow flower so that it's facing in the right directions. Now for the inside of the card, I'm going to use some Lawn Fawn Simply Sentiments to stamp the sentiment for the inside of the card. And I'm going to use some VersaFine Onyx Black ink for this. And I will stamp that to the inside of the card. And here's the final card. And I hope you enjoyed this video. Bye.